Hi, and welcome to this AQA A-Level Business revision video, focusing on 3.1.2, understanding different business forms. In today's video, we're going to look at the four main ownership styles of owning a business, as well as mutual businesses, and their link to risk. A quick reminder that my teaching here is separate to my consultation and teaching roles around the country. My name is Mr. Giles. Let's get down to business. So we're first going to start with businesses that have unlimited liability. And I've put that just here, unlimited liability. And then we'll move on to the limited companies. And it's an important distinction between those two because this concept of unlimited liability is often understated, in my opinion. First, we have sole traders and then we have partnerships. Let's do the sole traders first. I've just given some generic information up here as a quick revision. So a sole trader is usually one owner. So think of your hairdressers, maybe your local sweet shops, something like this. These are usually businesses very small in size and it's usually run by one person and their expertise. The problem with that is they have a limited amount of capital and possibly experience or expertise. And generally speaking, they would have to hire people to help them. It's a common misconception that people would say, oh, they have to do all the work themselves. Yes, they do, but they can have employees. The problem with that is that those employees are not going to be super as motivated as they are to fulfill the business needs. Anybody you employ, especially of a maybe more menial business, is not going to be super excited to be there. So there is a bit of a problem with that. So I have to employ people. They do suffer from unlimited liability, and we'll get there in a second, but they have ultimately full control and they get to keep all of the profit. So there is a lot of benefit in that. They put all the hard work in, they get all the reward. Up next, we have partnerships. This is 2 to 20 owners, and I've put over there deed of partnership. The deed of partnership is a potential legal document that the partnership might fill out. Think of it like a bit of a receipt for the business. So me and you put our names on a deed of partnership. We put in that we say on the document that we put in 50-50 of the money each. Therefore, we're entitled to 50-50 of the profit. We make that document so that there's no arguments down the line about who's entitled to what percentage of the profit. The beauty here is that you get more capital because it's two people's money and it's multiple people's expertise as well. And then you could even argue that you've got a little bit more manpower to do the jobs that you need to do, so you don't need to hire as many people. Again, this does suffer from unlimited liability, so there is risk involved on both partners or all 20 partners. And a common argument is that there might be possible conflicts, which is true. It's just not the best disadvantage to talk about because you wouldn't go into business, hopefully, with someone that you would have constant conflict with. So what is this concept of unlimited liability? Well, maybe you already know and you understand it, that the personal assets are at risk. And very simply put, that just means if I, sole trader Mr. Giles, went to the bank as Mr. Giles and asked him for a bank loan for £10,000, I, Mr. Giles, am personally responsible for that £10,000. Now, I might tell the bank that I'm using it for a business and they give me the thumbs up. But unfortunately, if whatever I'm doing fails, I still have to pay the bank back £10,000. Now, if I'm unable to pay that money back, then the bank is entitled to come and take personal assets of mine up to the value of the money that I owe them. And that's all well and good for, say, £10,000, but what about 50, 100? What about if you're starting up some sort of technology business that requires millions of pounds? Well, firstly, you're probably not going to get a bank loan for millions of pounds. And secondly, that is an insignificant amount of risk. The reason why I keep referring to the word risk is because the further away from risk that you get, the easier it is to make bigger decisions. And generally speaking, that's why sole trader businesses are small, because that one person inherits all of the worry and risk. Therefore, they're unlikely to make big, risky decisions. Okay, open one fish and chip shop, fine. Open 10, oof, that's a bit risky when it's all on me. Okay, so as we move to the partnership, that risk is split. There are two people that can inherit that risk. But again, if it's a 50-50 risk, it only halves the risk. You want to go and borrow £100,000, each partner is then responsible for £50,000 of that debt. So that unlimited liability, yes, it's a problem because it means that you are liable for the debts of the business, yes, but it inhibits risk-taking behavior. And that's the secret sauce there, folks. Let's move on and look at limited companies now. Okay, so limited companies now, and they're often referred to as limited companies. First of all, we have our LTD or our private limited company. This happens when either a sole trader or a partnership goes to what we call Companies House up in London and they register to become a limited company. Now, first of all, you have to understand that this company becomes a separate legal entity. That means it is no longer Mr. Giles's business. Mr. Giles's business is its own thing. It has its own set of accounts, its own credit score, takes on its own legal body. Okay. So, for example, if you hurt yourself at a McDonald's, you would sue McDonald's, the business, not Ronald McDonald, the owner of McDonald's. Okay. Now, that comes a bit tricky when it comes to franchising, but more on that later. So, that's important. So, the reason why I tell you that is because if you start a private limited company and then go to the bank and ask for money, and that private limited company has no financial records at all, it's not getting a bank loan. That's why we often start as a sole trader, because we can leverage our credit score, our personal finance history to borrow money. Okay. And we do have limited liability, more on that in a moment. We have shareholders. So they're no longer owners or partners. The language is important. They are shareholders and they are invited to the business. We have to find them. We have to search them out and invite them into the business. This can actually be really tricky if you don't know people who want to hand over money, risk for reward. However, you can now start inviting in angel investors. So people who are professional investors who want to give money to startups and then reap some of the rewards. And the other negative, however, is that we have to share our profits out in the form of a dividend. A share of the profit is now called a dividend. So we have to calculate that at the end of the year and pay all of our brand new shareholders that we've invited in. They also get some decision-making power as well, depending on what percentage of the business that we've sold to them. So we do have more access to capital and expertise, but at the cost of losing control and paying a dividend. The key difference between the private limited and the public limited is where those shares are sold. So for private, we invite our members in, our shareholders in. However, for public, we are able to sell our shares on the stock exchange, which means they can be bought by anybody. So we no longer have to go and search out people because we're not really looking for their expertise. When we sell on the stock exchange, we merely want to swap a share of our business for some money, some capital. Now that's wonderful because people like me and you can use apps like Trading 212 and we can go and buy shares in whatever business that we choose. However, that does also mean that your competitors can buy your shares as well. And so you have to be careful how many shares you release out into the world because you bet your bottom dollar every time you kind of release some shares, one of your competitors is buying them up to try and slowly gain control of your business. And this is where takeovers and often mergers occur. These two have limited liability, and we have to consider the concept of market capitalization. Okay, so before I explain that, let's just double check that we understand that again, a private limited company has to pay out has to pay out dividends to its shareholders. Okay, now we're going to talk about a concept in a second about these two, but let's do limited liability and market capitalization. So as we said before, unlimited liability is when your personal assets are at risk, whereas limited liability is when your personal assets are not at risk. Okay, that is a key distinction. They are not at risk. So that means if I'm giving money to Microsoft to buy a share and Microsoft go bust, I, Mr. Giles, only lose the money that I put in. And I say only, I don't want to lose that money, but hopefully I should be investing responsibly and understand that investing is somewhat of a gamble. There's risk involved. So I am comfortable to give my money to Microsoft, and Microsoft are much more comfortable to make big risk-taking decisions because nobody's money is really at risk. Okay, only the money that went into the business, not my house, not my car, none of those things. And that's a key distinction between the unlimited businesses and the limited businesses. Public limited companies have this concept of market capitalization to look at. Now, it's slightly different for a limited company, but we don't really get examined on that. Let's look at the public. Market cap is the number of shares available in the market times by the share price. Now, generally speaking, the number of shares available only really changes on a yearly basis if the business decides to issue more shares. However, the share price is determined by the market and it can go up and down. So if something bad happens in your business, the share price is going to fall. That's not good because that means your market capitalization has fallen. And if the market cap falls, it means the value of your business has fallen, which makes you a bigger and easier target for your competitors to come and buy you out. Think Elon Musk buying out Twitter. When he bought out Twitter, their market capitalization had fallen significantly over time as the amount of people using that platform had dropped over time. Twitter was worth probably twice as much at one point in time. And remember, our market cap also is what we use to leverage against banks to borrow money. So as a public limited company, if we rock up to the bank and ask to borrow 10 million and we say, hey, look, our market cap is 12 million, the bank is happy to lend us money because it knows it will recover it should the business go bust. Okay, so that's market cap. So those are our limited companies. Let's have a look at mutual businesses. Okay, last and by certainly no means least, we have the concept of a mutual business. Now, I have deliberately glossed over not-for-profit organisations because I feel like it would be a waste of my time to discuss charities with you here. Everybody knows what a charity is in the grand scheme of things. However, mutual businesses are similar to charities, but they just run in a slightly different way. So I'm going to give you the examples first. And the three examples I have for you are Nationwide, which you'll hopefully know is a building society, the cooperative group, which you either know as kind of like a mini supermarket, or they actually have a funeral directors and a bank too. And then there's a very small company, not that small, but a smallish company called Benenden Health, which is a healthcare provider. These are all considered mutual businesses. And the reason why is because these businesses are owned and run for the benefit of their members. And their members, generally speaking, are customers and workers. Okay. Now, generally speaking, the profits of these businesses are reinvested back into the business. There are no shareholders, there are no dividends paid out. The profits are either paid to the workers or they're reinvested back into the business to improve the service for the members. So, in order to be a part or to get products from Nationwide, you generally have to join it as a member. And you'll get a really good mortgage from them or a really good savings account, but you are also a member. Now, there's two kind of problems with that. First of all, because there is no shareholders, it's very difficult to gain extra capital in these businesses in the grand scheme of things, other than from economic activities like buying and selling. And that means that they're not as competitive as non-mutual businesses. They kind of struggle in the competitive nature. However, the members within them, usually the workers specifically, get a far better deal and are looked after far better, or the customers generally get a better service. They don't always get a better deal, but they get a better service. They run very similar to an LTD in that you obviously you're invited to be a member. Now, when it comes to, say, the co-op, for example, you can walk into any cooperative supermarket and start buying from there. It doesn't make you a member. There is a membership scheme, and if you get their card, you get a lovely discount and so on and so forth. However, when you go to work at that group, the cooperative group, you are invited in and indoctrinated as a member. So they are owned and run for the benefits of the members, which are usually the workers and or the customers. So any money that's made is reinvested for improved efficiency or make the workers' life better, or is paid back to the customers of some description. So they're very similar to not-for-profit organisations. I could even argue that they're not-for-profit, although they do make profit, they just reinvest it significantly. It's just not exactly the same. That will bring this video to an end. I appreciate it's been a very long one, and well done if you've made it all the way through. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments down below and I will try to answer them as quickly as I can. I'll catch you in the next one.